During the 1960s, at the height of the British invasion, it was customary for record labels in the United States and Canada to alter the output of bands coming from the UK in order to fit the norms of the American music industry and create continuity. After, in most cases, the group's music was released across the pond many months after its UK debut. This practice was common with many groups that were part of the British invasion, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Dave Clark Five, the Hollies, the Rolling Stones, and of course the most popular and influential act of them all, the Beatles. This series will be discussing how each album in the Beatles' official UK discography was released in North America. I think this is an important topic because although now the Beatles albums are all uniform around the world, these were the albums that people in the US and Canada grew up with. And while the Beatles' UK discography is considered official, and rightfully so, those are the albums the Beatles put together and had input on, I don't consider the US albums compilation albums, but instead an alternate discography worthy of recognition in its own right. The Beatles albums became uniform worldwide, starting with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band in 1967, so this series will focus on every album up to that point and where each songs were released and when. We'll start with the Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, released in the UK on March 22, 1963. Initially, Capitol Records in the US passed on releasing the Beatles' second single, Please Please Me, in 1963, until eventually EMI reached a licensing agreement with jazz and R&B record label VJ, who released the first Beatles LP in the US, Introducing the Beatles, released on January 10, 1964. This was not the first Beatles album released in North America, though. That title belongs to Beatlemania with the Beatles, which was released in Canada on November 25, 1963, which I will discuss in another video. VJ originally considered releasing Please Please Me unaltered, but eventually changed their mind and omitted two songs, Please Please Me and Ask Me Why, in order to fit the American norm of a 12-song LP. Less than a week after the album was released, VJ was served with a restraining order from Beechwood Music, Capitol Records' publishing subsidiary, because they own the American publishing rights to Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You. To circumvent this, VJ released a second version of the album with the two songs replaced with Ask Me Why and Please Please Me. Also notable is the omission of the 1, 2, 3 count-in by Paul McCartney and I Saw Her Standing There. On Introducing the Beatles, it starts with 4. The Canadian division of Capitol Records accepted the Beatles catalog quite a few months before its American counterpart did, and thus had a separate discography from the US up until the release of the Hard Day's Night soundtrack, when they became homogeneous. Capitol Records Canada released most of the songs on Please Please Me on the Twist and Shout album, released on February 3, 1964, omitting the first two tracks, I Saw Her Standing There and Misery, and replacing them with the singles From Me to You and She Loves You, on the end of sides 1 and 2, respectively. The first two tracks were later released on the Canadian-only Beatles album Long Tall Sally, released on May 11, 1964. Later on, long after the Beatles' success was established in the US in 1965, Capitol decided to release some of the songs from Please Please Me that had been previously released by VJ on Introducing the Beatles. The ensuing release was The Early Beatles, that featured 11 songs from Please Please Me, omitting I Saw Her Standing There, which was previously released on Meet the Beatles in early 1964, Misery, and There's a Place, which were not released on Capitol in the US until the Beatles' Rarities album in 1980, long after the Beatles broke up. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video for more Beatles-related content. Until then, see you in the next one.